welcome everybody. And no, thank you for coming. This is a great crowd to see for Principal Colloquium. Tonight we have Beverly Levine and Tad McMillan joining us, and I'm going to give them each a chance to say a little bit about their school, just for a minute or two, and then I'm sure that you guys have lots of questions for them. So thank you guys very much for coming, and thank you all again. And do you want water or anything? I would love a water.
I'm Beverly Levine. I'm the principal at Oglethorpe County Middle School. So that you don't spend the next hour guessing where my accent is from. I'm from Cape Town in South Africa. I have been here now 27 years. My parents tell me I speak with a strong American accent, but I know I don't sound like a true Southerner, although I am from South Africa. Our school, we've got a 6th through 8th middle school. We're in second year in a brand new building. So prior to that, we shared a facility with the high school, so that had its fair share of challenges. But being in our own building now has been wonderful. We've got 580 kids right now. We're a very rural county. For those of you who don't know Oglethorpe, we're very rural, very large size-wise, and lots of trees and chickens and all of that good stuff. Not that many people. So our tax base is incredibly low out in Oglethorpe County. So we really struggle financially out there. We have 58% of our kids on free and reduced lunch. We have made AYP for the last 6 years. We're hoping we can say it'll be our 7th year this year, but we'll wait to see that on our CRCT. So we work in professional learning communities in our school. We started that 5 years ago now, and it's been an outstanding process for us. For those of you who are student teaching or in schools that hopefully you do professional learning communities and are having the opportunity to see that, because it has made the world of difference for us out in Oglethorpe County.
And, I'm Tad McMillan, and I'm the principal at Clark Middle School here in Athens, and we have 562 children, 6th through 8th grade, and we also we're about 64% free and reduced lunch. We're really an interesting school in that we pull from probably some of the most sort of the wealthiest Athens neighborhoods, as well as from the absolute poorest Athens neighborhoods. And so that makes for an interesting dynamic and some nice challenges for our school. And we are an IB candidacy school. If you haven't heard, Clark County, we're in our 2nd year of the process, but all middle schools are headed that way. And it's the IB, which is the middle years program, not the diploma program. And so our goal is to do the middle years program, which is 6th through 10th grade, and get that going, and then another 2 years look at doing the diploma program at the high school. And maybe I'll stop there.
All right, does anybody have a question to lead us off?
I'll start.
Perfect.
All right. What is a unique question that you would ask in a typical interview?
I have a standard question. Try to put folks at ease just as quickly as we can. So, I'm always going to start with the typical, tell us a little bit about yourself. I want to hear about you, and I want to get a feel for, an interview is a two-way street. We're interviewing you just as much as you interviewing us. It's going to be a good fit both ways. One of the questions that I always ask, which just gets candidates thinking, is I'll always ask, think about your student teaching experience or teaching experience and relate something that went really well. But then on the flip side, we all have that moment where we wish we could wind the clock back on something we've done. And I ask folks to relay something that they wished through student teaching or some other experience that they could have a do-over on. And it just gives me a chance to see, you know, how human are they? Well, are they willing to be honest and say, yep, I've made a mistake there and I could have done it differently the next time I do it. So that's one I usually ask.
Yeah, and just to piggyback onto that, that's a great question. And we asked something similar. And no, you know, I know you already know this, but when you go in for the interview, a big thing that we're looking at is, are you coming in prepared? And are you coming? And so it's, at least I think, we don't try to make them that way. I just think it's real intimidating. I mean, you come in, if you interview at my school, you come in, usually there'll be 4 or 5 folks. We try to take about 30 minutes. I know, not answering your question, I will in a minute, but just sort of give you an idea of what the interview process is for us. Is our initial interview is 4 or 5 folks, try to take 30 minutes, and we have a bank of questions, and we try to fire questions at you, and we always tell you we're going to ask you this many about this many. And we take it, if somebody comes in and they know, we tell you we're going to ask you 8 questions and you answer the first question. And this happened, I know it's probably happened to you, somebody takes 20 minutes to answer their first question. That's real telling to us. So I think the point I wanted to make about that question is a lot of times in an interview I'm looking for specifics. And so the whole, tell us about something that you taught and that you did well and what kind of do-over. I'm always surprised at the number of people who, you know, they're just, oh, I can't think of anything right now. Well, that's what the interview is for, you to come in and to have thought about something. And what that question gets at is, are you reflective? Are you thinking about it? And are you, you know, have you thought about how you would change something? So I think it's a great question. I'll just say a question that I ask, and we're going to ask it more and more, is, and if you're student teaching, you know why, it has to do with how do you handle the fact that teachers are asked to do more in a day than they possibly can do? How do you prioritize, and how do you take care of yourself so that you don't burn out and can keep teaching? And so we ask people, because we want people coming in that, one, they've got good systems in place to prioritize and to multitask, but we also want people to know that you can't just, you're going to burn out, and that you're thinking about, yeah, this is how I take care of myself when I'm overwhelmed. Because when you first teach, actually I'll say I've been teaching or administrating for 25 years. I'm very overwhelmed right now, so it doesn't go away. But when you first teach, that first year is very overwhelming.
So prior to that then, what is something in a resume that makes you want to call someone for an interview? What do you look for?
I can tell you what I please, and I don't want to say I'll guarantee in this group, but every hiring season I will get one letter that will be addressed to a different principal. Every time. It'll either be a former principal, or they forgot to change my name and they've already sent it to another school. You'll get that. You'll also get principal spelled wrong.
Always.
Look up the spelling of principal. It's a real turn-off when you can't spell principal. So, and then, you know, if you're applying, and again, we know it's human, that you're going to be applying to every district. But if you're applying to Oglethorpe County Middle School, read your letter before you send it. Don't put in the last line, I look forward to being a part of the Barrow County staff. We get this every time. So you laugh about it, and you'll, I'm sure, agree that we get it all the time. What I'm looking for in a resume is just, I'm looking for any prior experience. If you've worked at camps, if you volunteered at Sunday school, put that in there. It just gives, gives us another opportunity to know that you've worked with kids. That's what we're looking for there. If you've got a part-time job as you go through school, it speaks volumes. So go ahead and put that in there. So any kinds of experiences that you've had, whether you've tutored a kid or anything like that. I'm not looking for, please include references. Don't put references available upon request. If you're applying for a position, chances are, if I'm calling you in for an interview, I'm going to call your references prior to bringing you in for the interview. Because the last thing I want to do is waste everybody's time having you come in for an interview if there's a real negative reference out there. Or I call and I get 3 negative references, then I've wasted your time coming in as well as ours. So prior to coming in for the interview, I'm already going to have called your references. So make sure that if you're teaching at another school and you sent me a letter saying you're interested, make sure that you've let that person know that you've used them as a reference. I can't tell you how many times we surprise people. I'm going to call people who you don't use as references to. So if you don't use your supervising teacher, we're going to call your supervising teacher whether you've used them or not. And typically, if you've been teaching for a few years, I'll call somebody, at that school that maybe you have not used as a reference to.
Yeah, everything she said. Really, the principal thing, and no, I mean, not to be, not to depress you, but know that the number of applications I get is unbelievable. And I am in a situation where I'm just trying to limit that however I can. So any principal PLE, I don't look at it again. So all of those little mistakes, and I always get that, how they've heard such great things about my school and have another school. Really? So I think that's a good thing. I'd also say that experience, I want to know about the experience. And I would say that, especially with the references, and I'm going to answer a question that nobody's asked, but it came up 3 times this past hiring cycle, which if there is something about you that's not, that you wish, and I'll just say DUI, if you put on, when you fill out an application that you don't have that, then even if I wanted to hire you, I can't hire you because you've lied on your application. And so that happened to me 3 times. I had a public drunkenness. Well, I'm going to find out about that. Is a great candidate, would have been a great math teacher, and I sent the whole way in. And then there are 2 things that happened. Is one, I sent in an application to my HR, and I hadn't done due diligence. So you can bet that I sent an email to every principal I knew about if this person's coming to your school, no, you don't want them, because it made me look bad because it almost went to the board. So I just would say, if you have something, and I think about the, my supervising teacher was a very nice person, just wasn't the greatest, wasn't a good match. And so if you have some skeleton in the closet or something like that, that can be explained, but don't just think we're not going to find out. Because I'll say, when somebody doesn't put supervising teacher, and any teacher I hire, if they don't have their principal, that's the first person I call. So, and I've had people come in and say, hey, here's my references. I want to let you know, I put my principal there, but he and I didn't always see eye to eye. I know you're going to want to call him, but after you call him, if you want to talk to me, and then I'm interested. So, anyway, I know nobody asked that question, but it happened to me too many times to not say it. Yeah, Allison.
So, speaking of references, are there any types of references that you prefer? Like, do you want personal? Do you want all professional? What kind of mix of references do you like that?
I like a mix. I like to see that experience. Typically if you have your student teaching experience, if you have, typically somebody has a professor, know that professors like to get their students hired, and so we know that. So you don't need to have too many folks from your department. But then if there is something else, you worked at a camp, or I hired a great math teacher this year out of multiple candidates. And I'll tell you, I called her where she worked at a camp, and the camp director just went on and on and on about this person, and that sort of helped us say, okay, we got to call this person in for a second interview.
Are there any of those experiences that are more significant than others? Like I'm talking about like the Sunday school or the camps or the part-time jobs, maybe not math related or education related.
If you've got like, if you've worked with in a special needs camp, let us know that, because it just gives you a different perspective. So, that's always a real good one to take a look at if you've worked at ESP or any of the other camps around, or you've tutored a student with a disability, something like that. Yeah, along the lines of the personal references, I mean, every time you'll see the reference from, a minister or, a favorite uncle, those don't hold a lot of weight for me, just because I wouldn't expect them to give you anything less than a great reference. So, but you're right, the camps and those part-time jobs really give us a lot of information.
But with along the lines of experience, I mean, know that, we want to make sure we're bringing people into our buildings who like kids. And so any kind of experience that shows that you've been around kids and that you actually like children, and those, to me, we're always looking. Sometimes we get somebody who looks great, but it's like, okay, wait, have you ever really been around children? And to me, that sometimes can be damaging if you don't have any experience.
What kind of program do you have for first-year teachers that are just out of college? Do you set them up with like a mentor, or?
We do. We have a strong mentoring program. Our folks have all been through a teacher support specialist program that trained them how to be a mentor. So it was a year-long class that they took in how to mentor a new teacher. We, in fact, if you're new to our school, you're going to be assigned a mentor, whether you have 25 years experience or you're brand new. Now, the person who's coming in with 25 years experience needs something completely different than a first-year teacher. They just need to know, how does the copier work? How do you do grades here? The first-year teacher needs a whole lot more. And so we're going to put somebody with you that can devote that time. It's not always somebody that's going to be on your team, because you're going to work very closely with your teammates. So you're going to have them as your support anyway. So if you came in as a 6th grade math teacher, you might have the 6th grade gifted math teacher or another math teacher as your mentor, not necessarily a 6th grade teacher. The folks we're divided in halls now, so we've got a 6th grade wing, 7th grade wing, and an 8th grade wing. So everybody on that 6th grade wing is going to be your mentor. We have 3 6th grade math teachers. They plan together, they meet together, their units are the same, their tests are the same, and so those other 2 are going to mentor that first-year teacher, but that's not their official role. So there's a tremendous amount of support for that first-year teacher. We don't set it up. Our primary school have monthly meetings for them. Ours is just on when the teacher, will touch base with you. They'll come in and observe you, and it's both a two-way street. We'll set up time for you to go observe other teachers, so that you have that opportunity of seeing what does a beginning lesson look like in an experienced teacher's classroom. If you're having trouble with end of the summarizing, we're going to set you up with a teacher who's strong in that area. So you might not just work with your mentor teacher, you're going to have a lot of assistance.
And I'm the same. I would say that's a good question, and my advice to you is to make sure you find that, whoever that is. If we sometimes assign people and whomever they are assigned is not there's just not good chemistry, find that person. You need, when you're doing this, you need to have somebody that you can kind of click with, that you can, go in and vent, and so it's important to find somebody to be your mentor. My first year teaching, my mentor was definitely not my mentor. I had actually as a PE teacher who, I don't think I would have survived my first year, but this guy just sort of took me under his wing and was very supportive in helping me just understand the culture of the school. And so I think it's really important. I would also say as an administrator, I like to know that, like, you know, we try to do a good job of that. That does, you know, I think all of us want to know if our new teachers are not feeling like they're getting the support that they need. Like, as I'm answering that question, I'm like, oh gosh, when I go back to what I need to do.
Ask that in the interview too, because when I started, they didn't assign, we didn't have mentors, and after the first week, as a brand new teacher, I was teaching special education. I was in a separate building from the school. I knew nobody. And I pretty much decided after the first week that that was it. I was looking forward to Christmas. I was going back to Sunday. And I just planned never to return. And I thought that they'll never find me. So that was my plan. And yeah, they started the year by taking all the new teachers on a tour of the county. Not a great idea when you've never been on, I'd never been on a school bus before, and it was July, it was hot, and they fed us deviled eggs for lunch. So I did not have a great beginning, but you know, soon after that I found, found somebody else who taught special ed, and that you definitely do want to find someone that you could go to with the questions that nobody else is willing to answer. So. And hang in there if the first week doesn't go great.
Okay.
Yeah.
When is it too early or too late to send in resumes? Because there's always the when do you guys start hiring? So when is it like appropriate?
Right now is when I'm starting to get a lot of the resumes. Before you all start sending me resumes, just to let you know, we're anticipating actually. I'm going to be one less teacher next year, unfortunately. I've got 200 8th graders that I'm sending on, hopefully all 200, to 9th grade, and I've got 160 coming from the elementary school. So we're going to be 40 less kids in our building next year. So right now, our contracts haven't gone out. Usually, 5 years ago, contracts were going out, starting to go out earlier and earlier. Now school districts are waiting later and later to see what are your exact numbers going to be. So the best thing to do is to watch Teach Georgia. That's where all of our positions get posted. But it's, you know, any resume I get at this point now, I just put into a folder. And I just keep a folder on each subject area so that if I have a position come available, I can look through it. I'll glance over the resume, but I'm not going to necessarily return a lot of calls right now until we know we have a position. So it's never too early. The other thing is, you know, right now we've got a long-term math position coming up, an opening for, I've got a teacher who's going to be pregnant, and who is pregnant, and will be out. So you have that come up, so you know, I will get a resume in and see that somebody has already graduated in December, and call them up and say, interested in a long-term sub position. So it's never really too early.
Yeah, I agree. It's never too early. I would say for Clark County, we are very strict in that positions are all posted on the Clark County website. If you want to work in Clark County, become very close friends with that website. And we now are required or are prevented from interviewing anyone who hasn't applied on the website. So I do get resumes. I have a notebook I've already started for this year, and I review them so that then when we post the position and I look down the list, I remember who I've already reviewed their materials. But I don't call people back. I email people back, but I don't call anyone until they've actually applied. And that's a change for us, and now it's very, very strict now.
Just to know, I had a math position last year. I had over 200 applications on Teach Georgia. Now, out of those people that applied, probably maybe half of them were qualified for the position. And that's frustrating when you put in front in big, bold letters what the qualifications are, and you get people applying who've got a social studies degree, and that's their certification, and they're applying for a math position. But you get it all the time, or you get those who don't have any teaching degree applying for positions, and I guess they hope to go through the TAP program. But it's, we're going to get a lot of applications. So, once you've applied online, go ahead and send us a copy of a resume. That's just, something else that I can attach a name with.
And it's a fine line between that, enough contact. I mean, just as you're applying out there, that to me, enough contact so that your name is still in the hopper, but people cross that line, and too much contact, and so just, I guess, I had someone who wanted a job who applied several times, and then right at dismissal was in my office and tried to sort of stop me as I'm trying to go out on bus duty and put a resume in my hand. And I mean, just being honest, I thought, okay, if this person doesn't understand the culture of a school better than to know at dismissal time, you do not get in anyone's way. So I just, it's kind of, to me, I think it's a real tough balance, because you want people to know that you're out there and you're still interested, but you don't want to just overwhelm their email box.
If you're finishing student teaching, I don't know when you guys finish up, but it's not a bad idea to get on a substitute list and start subbing in the schools. That gives us a chance to see you in action. Anytime we can see folks already in action, really does help us. Right now in my building, I've got 4 parapros that are now teachers. So a lot of folks come in that way. We've got a strong track record. If you're not able to get a teaching job, be willing to say, you know what, I'll have to deal with it as best I can, accept a parapro job, let the principal, let the staff see you at work. If a parapro is working exceptionally hard and exceptionally well, I'm going to give them every time the first opportunity for a teaching position. So, know that there are other routes to go other than just if you don't get that job the first time.
Anybody else have a question?
As far as bringing a portfolio to the interview, what would you like us to bring in that?
I'll let you go first.
Well, it's funny because I did one of these last year and we were very different.
Yes, that's why I'll let you go first.
I'll just say, one is don't bring a portfolio and wait till the very end of the interview, because I mean we do interviews 4 or 5 at a time, 30 minutes. So if at the very end of the interview then you say, oh, I brought this, I don't know if you want to see it, it's a little too late then. On the other hand, I have seen people come into an interview and just sort of say, while you're asking me questions, here is more my portfolio, and very deftly as we ask questions, they go, oh, well, actually, I have a great thing about that, and be able to sort of flip back and show that. So I wouldn't spend a lot of time with it, because we just, quite frankly, don't have the time to go all the way through. I've seen it used in a really kind of precise way, and it's been impressive. So I think it can be used right. The one thing is, I would say, don't. You do want to make sure you take it with you. For me, a lot of times people say, well, I'll just leave this here, and it's really, you should go on and take it with you and use it as a prop during the interview, but then take it.
And I'm not big on portfolios, and I sat in on another one with the middle grades, and the other principals all said, oh, you need to bring your portfolio, and I'm going, in an interview, I really don't have time to look at your portfolio. And I know a lot of your classes require you to do that, and I think that if you put that much time and effort, we feel bad not looking at it, but really, I'm trying to get a feel for you. I want to know about you and your personality, not how well you can put together a nice scrapbook. And that's what it boils down to. So I don't really have, I'm interested more in you and hearing about your experiences than I am in the portfolio.
Just don't get your feelings hurt, because that is, people bring in these beautiful things.
As a first-year teacher, what types of mistakes do you see them making that you just really wish they would not make?
Everything. No mistakes. No, I mean, I think probably the thing that makes you the most anxious is the just sort of classroom management, and usually that is the initial struggle, is just sort of finding your legs and figuring out what kind of class you want to have, and I think that a lot of times the sort of the mistake I see is either people are over here where they're just like, okay, I'm just going to have a relationship and talk to my kids and they'll know, and not have any structure at all, or the person who's all structure and no heart. And so it's trying to find that balance of a class that really, works for you. Because I will say, and my AP talks about this all the time, is that struggle to find she calls it your teacher voice, that you've studied you've been in situations, you've watched other people teach, you hear your professors talk, and all of that's great, but ultimately for you to be able to do this job, you have to find who you are and how you relate to children and how you problem solve, and that. So I know you didn't ask that, but I'd say that's that thing, is trying to figure out in the very beginning who you are, listen to all this great advice, but then come up with a good system that you can live with, but also helps you be effective. So I'd say classroom management is a big one, and then the other thing is just sometimes it seems like learning how to communicate with parents is sometimes a struggle, and really it can be sometimes the most, a great part of the job, but I think we kind of come into it sometimes thinking negatively about it, and I think it's really critical to get out there and to say, hey, I'm a first-year teacher and I'm excited about this and we're going to learn together.
I think classroom management is always going to be an issue, but I think the big thing is, if you're coming into our school, just to learn to be a team player, because we work so closely in teams. What's happening in one 6th grade math class is exactly the same as happening in the other one. You're going to find the same standards being worked on at the same time, the same assessments being used, how you choose to deliver that. But just being able to learn from your teammates and be willing to accept that advice, it's a tough struggle. And just the biggest thing is not to, a lot of times people want to, particularly if you're working with the older kids, not to make them your friends, to make sure that there is that boundary that, yes, I can care for you, but I am the authority figure.
You did say that interviews are a two-way street. So what are some of the questions you would like to hear from a potential teacher, and what are some questions that you don't want to hear from a potential teacher?
If you're coming to interview with us, I don't want you to ask me how are our test scores. Okay? That's available on the website. Look that up before you come. Know a little bit about our school. I'm always impressed with a candidate who's gone to our school website and will come in. We've got some unique programs at our school, and we'll maybe ask, like, I read about your start time. Can you tell me a little bit more about it? That tells me that they've taken interest in our school, about what we're doing, and want to know a little bit more information. So those are the kinds of things that I'm looking for. Not, or say, I've looked at your test scores and, I noticed that you had a tremendous increase in 8th grade math from last year to this year. What do you attribute that to, and how are you going to build on that? We did have, I had a gentleman come in one time who came in with all of our test scores for the last 5 years and proceeded to tell us how he thought we had done and how we could do better. And it just didn't sit real well. So I'm pushing you on that one, but for you to have looked at our website and to know a little bit about us, that's what's good.
And I would say there should be 2 stages of questions, like, you know, that initial interview where what you want more than anything is to get a call back and to really be considered. So know that I would shift, once you know you're a candidate, do try to think about what do you need to know that is going to help you understand that this is a place you should work. I mean, I think that in that initial interview, any kind of questions, I mean, I'll just tell you a great scam that I see people use all the time, and it always works for me, with me too, is people always ask, well, do you let first-year teachers be the director of the yearbook? Or do you let, so that it's kind of like, oh wow, okay, this is somebody who's really going to get involved in our school. I get people who do that, and it does work, because I've had the other where people are like, how many after-school activities are a teacher expected to come to? Well, if in your first interview you're asking that sort of tells me something. However, I would say that second question, before you sign on the dotted line, those are good things to know. I mean, what if there's this, school where they have a nightly something that's going on every single week and they expect all teachers to be there? Well, you may still want the job, but you probably want to know that before you sign your contract. But don't ask that in the first interview.
Ask how the school operates. If they don't explain that, we generally go into that a lot, but ask how their teams work. Do they work in professional learning communities? How do the teachers plan? Now, a lot of that will get answered. Write your questions down ahead of time, because chances are when you get to the end of the interview, your mind's going to be blank. But don't have it so scripted that we sat and we actually talked about it today. My assistant principal and I, we did an interview over the summer, and this was 2 summers ago, and we asked the candidate, tell us a little bit about yourself. And honestly, she took her notepad and was searching for the answer. We knew we were in trouble at that point. If you can't answer, tell us a little bit about yourself without looking at your notes. It's not a good thing. But if you've got questions that you know ahead of time, and don't be shy, and I always tell folks, I give them a card and I say, as you're driving home, you're going to think, I should have asked this question. It's okay to email us back and say, I really meant to ask this question, forgot, can you help me out here? So, and that's perfectly okay to do.
But I guess along just the give and take is also understand that the expectation is that you're going to be nervous, and that's really okay. That everybody's nervous. I mean, every job you interview for, and now I've interviewed for multiple jobs. Some jobs I've interviewed for that I really didn't even want, and I still was nervous going into it. So it's just, the expectation is that you're going to be nervous. I was going to say something tied to that, and I can't remember, so I guess I'm still nervous.
We will do a tour of the school after the interview, and I will have one of the teachers who sat in on the interview do that. That's a great time to ask those questions that you didn't want to ask in the big group and get the feedback from one of the teachers, too.
With it being competitive as it is, we're likely going to apply to more than one school. Say we made it to the interview process for 2 different ones and we're offered the position and having to turn yours down. Is there resentment held there at all? Honestly?
Not in this
Not at all. No, there's not, and it's also, I will say, if you know there are 2 jobs and you're interested in both, it's okay to share that. The thing is I have had people have called back and they really want an answer, and they're like, I know I'm being considered at another place, and you know, it's just not true. You know, so only use that, you know. Well, I just know that, I had that situation where there was, like, Barrow was ripping 60 folks, and somebody told me that, oh, well, I'm also being considered in Barrow County. I was like, okay, well, how can that be true if they're cutting? So just be honest about it, but I really appreciate that honesty. I mean, especially because if I have interviewed, you know, realize it takes a lot of time to interview. And so if I'm putting that investment of time in and you're under a time constraint and you may be accepting another position, I like knowing that going into it. But no, I don't think anyone holds that against, and that people are, I mean, that's natural. We know you're looking at different places. So.
Now, if you accept a position with somebody and then you feel like, you know, you've given somebody your word and said, yeah, but you know, you've been offered a position and you accept, your name's gone before the board, and then you turn around and get an offer from a neighboring county, that's not going to look real good. Chances are you won't be offered another contract in that county. But if I'm interviewing you and you then tomorrow get a call from Barrow County offering you a position, but you would prefer to be at our school, there's nothing wrong with calling and saying, I've been offered a position, just wanted to let you know that. That just helps me to know I either need to speed up my process if I'm really interested, or I need to say congratulations and good luck, and I don't have to continue to consider you. So.
But that does go on. Every year we hear about that, and know that the HR directors all go to these meetings together, so they know each other, and they do. So if somebody has accepted a position in another county and then also accepted a position, they found a better one, then there's I think a likelihood that you're going to lose both positions, because those guys stay in touch. So be careful about that.
Do we have any more questions?
So a lot of us are coming from the same experience background. I know people are with the student teaching experience and the practicum experience, but really that's it for the most of us. What would make us stand out rather than somebody who has had 20 years of experience in the math classroom compared to us?
You certainly bring new technology. That's what we're going to look for. You bring in new ideas, and that's what we're looking for. We're not looking for somebody. You could have somebody who's been teaching for 20 years, but they've taught the same lessons over and over for 20 years. We're looking for someone to come in who's going to be a good fit, who's going to bring some new ideas and say, have you thought about that? We've got some dynamic student teachers right now who are just adding a tremendous amount, particularly to some of our veteran teachers, as they bring in more of the technology that excites the kids. So, I don't think you need to be concerned that, hey, I'm a first-year teacher. We don't always go with the experience. Just know that, hopefully you guys are being exposed to, the new standards coming up and, Common Core. So you're going to have a step up on a lot of our folks who really are just starting to acknowledge Common Core, and it's a really good time to be coming in. The curriculum's changing for everybody. We're having to rewrite units, rewrite assessments, redo everything. So it's almost like all of our teachers are first-year teachers again. So it's a good time to be coming in.
Yeah, and I just want to echo that. It's a great time to be coming in, and that skill that you're bringing in is something, the state has the SLDS, which is a whole information management system, and then there's a learner management system, and how those are going to work together. We don't know, but that's going to, in the next year, that's going to come out. And so there's this new technology that's totally going to change how we do things. And so that's one thing you have. The other thing is know that we put together teams very carefully. And sometimes you have a team and you know you just need new blood. And so, you know that it's not one of those things is you don't have any experience right out of the starting gate, you're behind, because that's not the case. I would stress again, anything you can do to kind of push up that experience. I mean, like if you're student teaching in a school and they have an after-school program, to be able to say, well, I stayed after school these 2 days to get extra experience. I mean, things like that do help and do sort of, you know, separate you from somebody who has no experience at all.
Another question?
Okay, if you have 2 applicants, one that hasn't had any teaching experience and has a master's degree, and one that has an undergrad degree with no teaching experience, and they're both like equally qualified, which one would you rather hire? Because one with more certification or one?
To me, if they have no teaching experience, okay, it does, the masters to me, I'm not going to necessarily go after somebody who has a master's degree. I'm not going to necessarily go after somebody with an undergrad degree because the pay is less, okay? So those factors don't come into it. I think folks, in my opinion, teachers who have had a little bit of experience and then go work on their masters bring a lot more to the master's program. Just because they're drawing on those experiences rather than having to go into the classroom for an hour to do an observation. You don't get quite the same feel. So, it doesn't, to me, it's not one or the other. I'm going to be looking at a number of other factors. It doesn't say to me they've done their masters, they will make a better teacher, or they only have undergrad. I don't need to consider that. So.
Yeah, I would agree with that. We really are looking at your resume, your credentials, how you do in the interview, your references. I would offer another piece of unsolicited advice, which is I'm surprised at the number of people who sort of knock themselves out of the running before they even get to the interview. Like a common mistake is, I survived because of my secretary. So if somebody calls and is short or rude with my secretary, you bet she comes in and tells me. And so you're coming in already with maybe the most powerful person in the school who doesn't like you. So make sure that all of those things that, when you're waiting in the room, I'll tell you, my last secretary, she would just come back and report. Like, okay, you know what, the whole time they're out there just talking so loud on their cell phone. And so then you come back and think, I don't know anything, but it's like, well, so just make sure you're not doing anything before you even get to the point of being considered to hurt your chances. And also little things like, you would be surprised at the number of people who are late to interviews. Well, think about that for a minute. I got to make sure that you are at 6 different places during the school day on time. Somebody can't make it to an interview on time, and really for any reason. To me, there's no excusable reason to be late. And I'll say I'm not a hard person like that, but that happens all the time, that people come late, and I'm like, how? You really hurt yourself before you even started.
If you get there an hour early, drive around the county and experience. Don't come sit in the office, okay? Because the teachers are not ready, so it's not like we're going to be able to take you early. The teachers are, teaching, and we've set up their time, so. But coming in 15 minutes early and just getting a feel for the school. You will learn a tremendous amount from a school sitting in that office. You will know the culture of that school before you leave. As you walk in a building, you can tell the culture of a school within the first 5 minutes of being there. So you'll learn a lot from that.
Who do you typically have on an interview team?
I will sit in on every interview. Sometimes my assistant principal, not always. I will have team members. I'll have the team leader, even if they're not a part of that subject area, and then somebody that will be working very closely with the team. So if it's a 7th grade math position, I'm going to have a 7th grade math teacher there, and the 7th grade team leader. So I'm going to have representatives. Usually, very rarely will I have more than 4 people in the interview. Four would be max for us.
Sort of the same. I mean, what I do for my first interview is I have a committee that's kind of like my interview committee that's sort of generic, good people who have interviewed with me in the past. And then when we narrow it down, then I'll have the team come in and go through the second interview.
And I don't always do 2 interviews. I mean, it is not uncommon when I've reached the end of the interview process that, you know, I've called references already. You get a feel for the person the moment they're sitting in the interview. First 5 minutes in your interview are the most critical 5 minutes, just because you know immediately whether it's a good fit or not. I've had a teacher take a candidate out on a tour of the school, and before they'd left the building, offered them the position. So, but you know, if you're out on the tour and I don't stop you, that doesn't necessarily mean you didn't get the job. But no, we've done that before.
Not me. Very methodical. I don't never. Even if somebody I think is the greatest, I always sleep on it.
See, I'm scared I'm going to lose out to somebody.
From now on, I'm going to ask
So
you interview it.
Well, he's sleeping on it.
I always say she's great when she hasn't been drinking. She's a great principal. It's dog eat dog world. I know we're sort of getting to the point of wrapping up, and if I could, I just would like to just say something to you, just because I think you know, one of the reasons we're both here is because we really care about our profession, and you know, it is for me, it's sacred work, and I think it's important for you. You're kind of caught in this balance of you really want a job, and so okay, almost any school is good. My advice to you is have a plan, because schools are very different. I mean, schools are, and that's a wonderful thing, because I mean, all of you are very different, but you're not going to fit in every school. And so the trick is to find a school that supports the values that you support and treats kids the way you feel like they ought to be treated, that your whole philosophy works with that school. And it is tough when you first start out, because sometimes you do have to take a position maybe that's not your first choice. I guess my advice to you is just still stay true to what your voice is, what kind of school you want to work in, and get to that school. I've had too many people over, you know, that I think would be really great educators that I just think, you know, they're just not a good fit for my school. They'd be a great fit for another school. I mean, and so just sort of keep that in mind, that it's important that you find a school that supports the person that you want to be and the teacher you want to be. And schools are, I mean, they're incredibly different. Ours are very similar.
Yeah, I mean, if in your first few years that's not a good fit, we lose a lot of teachers in their first 3 years. If it's not a good fit, don't say, education, I made a mistake, education's not for me. Make sure that you're given another school with a different fit a try. So, you know, just make sure that you're doing that. Hiring is the most important thing that we do. When it comes to the hiring season, you know, drop everything and we focus on that. Because if you don't hire well, it becomes a year-long problem. So it is a critical part of our job. So we take it seriously, and know that if you're applying, we're going to go through your things and look at it. If you know someone in a district, or you know one of our teachers or something like that, just to have some kind of personal connection always helps. When I started looking at Teach Georgia and there are 200 names there and none of them mean anything to me, then I started relying on outside sources to say, hey, I have a friend who's applying, could you at least take a look? So make sure that you're connecting with people that way.
Do we have any last questions? Let's thank our speakers for coming. I think you gave really, really good advice. No, thank you again for joining us. And thank you all. Have some cookies on the way out if you would. And have a good evening.